Today on The Late Disciple, things get dark as John the Baptist meets a brutal end. Jesus performs one of his most famous miracles, and Peter takes a few bold steps, literally. Let's get into Matthew chapter 14. Good morning. I'm David, and thank you for joining me for another episode of The Late Disciple, where we explore Scripture with new eyes and fresh observations. We open today with a bit of a flashback, a grim account of John the Baptist's execution. King Herod hears reports of Jesus' activities and he panics. He thinks John the Baptist has come back from the dead. Why? Because Herod has a guilty conscience, assuming he has a conscience at all, that is. Here's the backstory. John had publicly called out Herod for taking his brother's wife, Herodias. Herod didn't like that, but he was afraid of the people who saw John as a prophet. So, while he was okay with throwing John into prison, he didn't dare take the next step of executing him. His wife Herodias, on the other hand, was not so conflicted. She wanted John very dead, and she plotted accordingly. At Herod's birthday party, Herodias' daughter performs a dance that pleases Herod so much that he makes a foolish, boastful vow. "Ask me for anything," he says. And now Herodias' plotting pays off because her daughter asked for John the Baptist's head on a platter. As much as Herod didn't want to be the one that killed John, his pride prevents him from backing away from his oath in the presence of so many guests. So, just like that, a prophet of God is silenced to satisfy a grudge. It's one of the most tragic moments of the New Testament. The disciples of John bury his body and go tell Jesus. Wait, I hear you say. You told me in one of your very first videos that Jesus and Mary had to flee Bethlehem because King Herod was seeking the death of Jesus, and that they later returned to Israel after Herod's death. So how can Herod still be alive for this story? Is there more than one Herod? Well, yes, fictitious viewer that I just made up, yes there is. That first King Herod? That was Herod the Great, king of Judea. He had 6 sons by 4 different women, and we're going to concentrate on 2 of those sons here. Herod Philip I and Herod Antipas, from 2 different mothers, making them half-brothers. Herod Philip I was both Herodias' husband and her uncle. Yeah, the family tree is questionable. Herod Antipas was one of the 4 Roman-appointed tetrarchs, which meant he had power and influence, which apparently he used to convince Herodias to leave Philip and marry him. And it was this last part that John the Baptist had a problem with, and for which he shamed Herod, resulting in John's imprisonment and ultimately his death. Jesus, upon hearing the news of John's death, does what many of us would do when we're grieving. He seeks solitude. He withdraws by boat to a solitary place, but the crowds won't leave him alone. Thousands follow him on foot. And here's what's beautiful. Instead of sending them away, Jesus has compassion. He heals their sick. He tends to them all day. As evening approaches, the disciples come to Jesus and say, "We should probably send these people away so they can buy food." But Jesus says, "No, they don't need to go. You need to feed them." Now they only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Not exactly a cornucopia. It's barely a Lunchable. But Jesus takes the small offering, looks to heaven, blesses it, and somehow it multiplies. Everyone eats. In fact, there's so much food that everyone is completely satiated, and there are 12 baskets of leftover food afterward. And there were more than 5,000 people at this gathering. This isn't just a miracle of provision, it's a sign that Jesus is the bread of life, that with him, scarcity becomes abundance. Recently at my church, we were blessed with a powerful sermon on the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000 as told in the book of Mark. What made this sermon especially memorable was how our pastor highlighted striking parallels between this story and Psalm 23. Two passages that at first glance seem completely unrelated, but ultimately share deep and surprising connections. I'll include a link to this sermon in the video description, and I highly recommend giving it a listen. Right after feeding the thousands, Jesus sends his disciples ahead by boat, while he himself retreats to pray alone. Remember, initially he was seeking some isolation to grieve over the recent loss of John. What happens next is one of the most iconic moments in the Gospels. It's the middle of the night, and the disciples are in the boat fighting against heavy waves when they see a figure walking on the water toward them. They have no idea this is Jesus, so naturally they're frightened. They think it's a ghost. But Jesus immediately reassures them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." Peter, clearly demonstrating that he's the leader of the disciples, says, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus says, "Come." And Peter actually steps out of the boat, and for a moment he walks on the water. But then he notices the wind, doubts begin to creep in, and he starts to sink. He cries out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus reaches out his hand and catches him. And once again we hear the familiar, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" They climb into the boat, and the wind dies down, and the disciples worship him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." This moment is so layered. It's about faith, doubt, fear, and trust. Peter didn't fail because he sank. He stepped out when no one else did, and he walked on water, no matter how briefly. But it was when he shifted his focus from Jesus to the storm that he started to think. And he started to sink. Think about that. Finally, they land at Gennesaret, and word spreads quickly that Jesus has arrived. People bring their sick from all around, and they beg him just to let them touch the edge of his cloak. And everyone who touches him is healed. Not just the spiritually elite, not just the disciples. Everyone who reached out and touched him was made whole. Matthew 14 is packed with emotional weight and spiritual power. We see the death of a bold prophet. We see the compassion of Jesus for the hurting and the hungry, even in the wake of his great loss. We see the miraculous provision of food. We see faith walking on water and doubt sinking. And we see healing for everyone who reaches out. This chapter reminds us, when life is overwhelming, when grief hits, when storms rage, or when we feel like we have nothing left to offer, Jesus is enough. In our next video, we'll continue with Matthew chapter 15, where Jesus challenges tradition and a Gentile woman's faith catches even him by surprise. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe, and please drop a comment below with your thoughts or questions, or your favorite part of Matthew 14. And as always, remember, we are all disciples. It is never too late.